You're watching The Breakfast Club.
Morning, everybody. It's DJ MV Angela Yee, Charlamagne the Guy. We are The Breakfast Club. We got a special guest in the building.
Okay, let's see if he gets this right.
Now he's running for New York State Attorney General, Keith Wofford.
Morning.
Yes. Good morning,
Great to
sir.
be here. Absolutely great to be here.
How you doing?
Now, we had your opponent, Tish James, on previously. Did you have a chance to hear that interview?
I did get to watch that interview. Absolutely. It was a very, very good interview.
Okay. Yeah, I would love to hear what you thought about that. Now, what's interesting to me is that you are a black Republican, which I don't know too many. I think I might have met like two that I know
There's a lot of black Republicans out there.
I don't know a lot.
There's some black
personally.
Now, why are you a Republican? Why did you decide to be a Republican?
You know, the big thing for me was about the schools.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the Democratic Party. I mean, look, first of all, I just believe in freedom of choice, freedom of opportunity, freedom to control your own destiny. But the big thing that it came down to in terms of issues for me in this state was the schools. And what's going on with the school system today in our community is completely unacceptable. I mean, I grew up in Buffalo on the east side, I don't know, way back when, 30, 40 years ago. And me and my brother were able to go to a public school. My dad worked at the Chevy plant.
Mm-hmm.
And we went to public school in Buffalo and were able to get really good educations, even though we were in a neighborhood that didn't really have any money. You know, we were working class like a lot of other folks. And I was able to go to Harvard on a scholarship. My brother was able to go to college, was a communications security officer in the military. You know, he was a biology major, Russian minor in college. So we got really high quality educations in the public schools. And, you know, there was an environment and economy where my dad could go to work at the plant. And so for me, that economic opportunity for working people to create something for their families and for their children and to move up, and the ability to send your kids to a school that allows their intellectual talent to flourish, to me is the critical issue. And I just have a deal breaker issue with where the Democrats are on that, because they're not allowing that opportunity to be created in inner cities. They're making a whole lot of excuses. You know, I mean, they say that really people can't learn because they don't have money, which is wrong. They say that these boys can't learn. I mean, year after year after you look at the performance in these public schools in these big cities and in New York in particular, you know, you have remarkably low rates of proficiency, remarkably low rates of graduation, and particularly for black boys. They're not teaching them to read and do math. I mean, it's completely unacceptable. And then the charter school thing, you know, you get me started on this. The charter school thing and where these politicians are on that is completely unacceptable. You've got a situation in New York where you have charter schools with the same kids from that same demographic of not a lot of money, but just striving, you know, and in the charter schools, even though they're in the same building, those kids are performing better than the regular public school kids with less money.
Well, usually they have smaller classrooms too, right?
No, they have, but look, the point is they run it, but hold on, they have less money from the school system. They get 75 cents on the dollar for what happens with the other kids. They're in the same building, and the performance isn't just a little bit better. It's like night and day, you know, and you have families dying to get into these schools. You have 50,000 families a year who try to get in. Hold on, 50,000 families a year in New York City trying to get into charter schools can't get in. You should not have to win a lottery like Powerball to get into a decent public school. But the career politicians who are in the pocket of these teachers' unions, they go along and say, you got to cap these schools. You can't create more seats. And so that kind of nonsense, I think, is insane. I think it sells the black community short. I think it sells our kids, particularly our young boys, short. And it's just unacceptable to me. And so I have a deal breaker beef with the Democrats over the schools issue.
So that's why you're Republican. And I get it because, I mean, I think the school systems are bad. My zone school I didn't go to because it's one of the worst in the city. But, you know, people would say, we talk about the African-American, you said it's hurting the African-Americans. You know, one thing that when we read about you, you said that you voted for Trump. Why did you vote for Trump?
I voted for Trump because we got to have some economic opportunity in this country. And when you look at things like trade, I mean, I grew up, as I said, in Buffalo. My dad worked in the factory. And you look at middle America and what's happening with jobs and employment, you know, upstate New York, Midwest, jobs flowing out, opportunity flowing out, businesses flowing out. And one of the reasons for that is we don't cut the right deals as a country when it comes to trade. You know, and I wanted someone who was going to cut better deals because it's the jobs of the working class that are at stake. And I just thought, you know, President Trump could cut better deals. And look what happened with that NAFTA redo. It was exactly what happened. They redid NAFTA. It's pending approval now. And they have more American content in the cars that's mandated. They have a better deal for agriculture that's in there. So, you know, I was looking at the bread and butter issues of jobs and trade and who's sticking up for American workers, and I just thought he was better on that.
You still think
Now,
it's a
what
good
about-
idea that you voted for Trump?
You know, I think it's a good idea that I did because at the time he was the right candidate for what America needed in that 2016 election.
How do you feel
and
about
and
now?
and there are a lot of things. Look, I've been perfectly clear. There are things he's done and that he does that I disagree with. Right? There's things he said that I disagree with. I mean, I've said point blank, that Charlottesville thing with both sides. I thought that was BS.
They had some
but I've
fine
been
people on both sides.
Yeah,
is what he said.
I said both sides was BS. So I've been perfectly clear that for me, this is not a partisan thing. When you go for the office of Attorney General, you're there to enforce the law, and you don't just enforce it for the people you agree with, and you don't just enforce it against the people you disagree with. You don't use the legal system to, go harder on the people you disagree with, and you don't use it to go easier on the people you agree with.
No, the reason
You
I
have
say that
to-
is because, to me, and maybe not to you, Trump is a racist.
So-
Do you think that?
No, I don't think he's a racist. His
Why
son
don't
and
you
daughter,
think
his son and daughter are Jewish. Okay, he says some things. I agree with you. He shouldn't be saying.
He called.
But you know what?
He called the Mexicans rapists. Mexican immigrants rapists.
Because
He
they're
said a lot.
And
Look, he said a lot of
Yeah,
things.
definitely instilled fear in a lot of people.
He didn't
and
let black
created
people stay at his place.
Very divisive.
He's definitely racist. I mean, you could say he's not racist. He's racist against Mexicans. He's racist against blacks. He's
The
disrespectful
Ishhole
to
countries,
women.
that comment where he said
He's
it's
Ishhole
shithole
company.
countries.
Like,
Look, I
the fact
understand.
that you don't
let
say
me
that he's racist,
let
you
me.
can't see that as an African American.
Well, hold on a second. Let's talk.
Strange.
Let's talk about me as an African American.
Yes, sir.
Because let me tell you, there have been racists out there for a long time. So I don't agree with you. But even if you were right, that doesn't take away from the issues that this community needs to be focused on in this election. We have a state election for state attorney general, the person who's supposed to be protecting the public fisc, protecting, making sure money goes where it's supposed to go, keeping these crooked politicians from stealing from us, and making sure that when we put money into the government for schools and the subway and everything else, the money goes where it's supposed to go. And look, with all the crazy stuff going on in New York State and New York City, all the ripoffs, all the pain that's being meted out to this community, we got to focus on local issues. Let me tell you, we got a subway. I mean, think about everybody sweating on the platform. They spend $2 billion a mile to build a subway. They should be building 10 times the subways for that. Everybody says it. They've investigated it. But nobody's cracking down and making sure the money goes where it's supposed to go. And who's sweating on the platform? You and me is sweating on the platform because these crooked politicians want to put that money in the pockets of the people who get them back in the office. I mean, look, I'm not a politician. So I'm willing to say what I think and what I mean to say without all this sugarcoating and political baloney. And the reason I do it is because this community needs more people who aren't just going along to get along. I mean, look, my opponent had the nerve to sit on this show and say I was disqualified from being attorney general. She's been sitting around on a government payroll for 10 to 15 years while I've been in the private sector doing something nobody from our community is doing, running a 700 lawyer office, practicing law at the highest level, channeling hundreds of thousands of dollars into charities that have to do with education of black people, have to do with preserving the history of black people. So she isn't even qualified to speak about my qualifications, much less talk about my experience when she's been sitting on a public payroll for 10 to 15 years. That kind of crab mentality is exactly what holds this community back.
I would love to know what you think about prison reform also and Rikers Island and all the things that have been happening there.
So let's talk about criminal justice reform generally. Here's the thing, as an African-American man, I'm just going to put it to you, the straight reality is once you get mixed up in the criminal justice system as a black man, it's hard to get yourself unmixed up in it. And so we've got a lot of problems in the system beginning to end. As Attorney General, I want to focus on keeping more black kids out of the system in the beginning. That first means we have to deal with this schools issue, point blank. Mm-hmm. Number two, it also means we have to deal with this speedy trial issue. We have a speedy trial statute. Under the Constitution, you have a right to speedy trial.
Right, and sometimes you sit in jail waiting.
We have a speedy trial statute where there is the Bronx DA has a PowerPoint, because we have this in New York, a funny speedy trial statute. I don't think it's constitutional, to be honest with you, that allows you to just delay and delay and delay without bringing someone before the court and getting a conviction. And they can just languish in the system forever, practically forever. That's why you had that situation where the young man committed suicide.
Khalif Browder.
Yeah. But they have this PowerPoint in the Bronx where they train young people and they say that the speedy trial statute's the bane of their existence and their goal is to stop the clock. That's how they're training young DAs. Now, my opponent doesn't call out the Bronx DA. She knows about this. They talk about the poker game. Now, these are young men's lives. They're talking about in this PowerPoint, the poker game. So, my problem with my opponent, and again, long career of public service, and that's to be respected, but her independence ends when her political people get involved. She speaks truth to power except when it's her own political people. And that's my problem with these career politicians. Because how could you have this sort of stuff going on in the Bronx DA's office and Tish James says nothing? How can you have this TPT program where Bill de Blasio is literally stealing elderly black folks' homes? The TPT program is supposed to be a slumlord program. They've been using this program just for a few $1,000s in back taxes and a few $1,000s in water bills to take $1 million homes, $2 million homes from elderly black homeowners. Their life savings, and they pay nothing. I started talking about this, and others started talking about this, but my opponent says nothing. This is blatantly unconstitutional. How can you have, people saying they speak truth to power when they're allowing this crooked mayor to steal black folks' homes and steal their life savings? So my thing is this whole thing about the politicians swaggering around and, saying they're speaking truth to power. They speak truth to power when it's the other people, when there's no political price for it. But when it's their own people, they just go along to get along. And that's why I came in from outside of politics, because I got sick of seeing this nonsense.
Well, you talk about your opponent, Tish James, and you talk about what she's done. She's done more for African American in the community than any politician out there. She is on the ground, on the streets, helping people day in and day out. And there's a history of her helping people, not for profit, really trying to get our community back. So what have you done for your own community to help our own people?
What I've done is I have contributed tens of thousands and directed hundreds of thousands of dollars into educational programs, job opportunity programs. I've spent my own personal time involved with those programs. I actually defended the oldest black church in Boston pro bono when a bank was trying to foreclose on them. And I actually put the CEO in the chair and got him to admit how his community bank had condos for him in Miami and in Santa Monica and had luxury cars. So when it comes to actually sticking up and representing and channeling resources in the community, I have a long history of doing that. I just do it quietly because I'm not running for office and I'm not a politician. So, look, my issue is not
for office.
I am. But my issue with my opponent, Tish, is not that she hasn't done things in the public interest. I started by commending that. It's that when it gets to rubber hitting the road of it being opposing her own political people, all of a sudden these massive things like denying the constitutional rights of blacks in the Bronx to a speedy trial and denying the constitutional rights of black homeowners whose life savings are being stolen by de Blasio, then all of a sudden, nothing. So it's this whole thing about independence is the critical issue in the Attorney General's office, because we got Andrew Cuomo at the top of this thing, and Andrew Cuomo's people have been running a con game like nobody's business. I mean, they've been taking economic development money. You heard about this Buffalo billion. I was happy that Buffalo was going to get $1 billion to create some jobs back on the east side where I lived and create some jobs in the city of Buffalo. But then they rigged up $750 million in one contract for a contributor. And, I came up with a plan. I've put out a plan to go after some of this corruption. But you have to have someone with the independence who doesn't have to go along to get along with these politicians, or it's never going to happen.
Now, what happened with Nighthead Capital? What happened with you and Nighthead Capital and people saying that you were defaulting the people of Puerto Rico?
Well, this is real simple. Puerto Rico tried to do something that was illegal. They tried to take some property from a client. I went to court for the client. We won, and then it got settled. So, that's the way the court system works. You go in, you stand up for your rights, and that's that. And the settlement actually was agreed to by the government of Puerto Rico. So now that's a cooperative arrangement. Mm-hmm. So that's what I did, straightforward. Look, I've had thousands of clients over the years, and, well, not thousands. My firm has thousands of clients. I've had dozens of clients over the years. And one of the things I'm very proud of is that I have spent a long time trying to learn to be the best that I can be at what I do. And I have been recognized as one of the best at what I do. And that's important because the taxpayers need someone who knows all the tricks of the trade, knows every trick in the book, knows how to get back money when people make it disappear. Because we've got a lot of folks in this political system, not everybody, but a lot of folks in this political system who have been making billions of dollars of taxpayers' money disappear. And the cost of that money disappearing is killing us. That money is supposed to be creating jobs for us. That money's supposed to be improving schools for us.
Can I ask a
That
question
might-
about Donald Trump then? Because they've been pursuing legal action against Donald Trump. Would you continue to do that? Because
So
of
there are a
his
lot
charities?
of sure. Let's talk about that because that's something that needs to be very clear. Everybody is subject to the law in America. Nobody is above the law, and especially not Donald Trump. So, but this is not a political thing of you go after it because it's Trump or you go easy on him because it's Trump. Where you have to go after the federal government because there's a disagreement, and I've said like this census thing where they're trying to undercount, I said, no way. We're going to fight that to the death because you're trying to deny us a congressional representation. You're trying to deny us a federal funding. You know, the point of the census is to count.
To count everybody.
Right. So, you know, on that one, hey, there's a legitimate disagreement of the state of New York as a sovereign its people. I'm going to, fight like heck on that one. You know, there are other instances where we have a legitimate disagreement with, as a state with the federal government to protect the citizens. And in all those cases, I'll pursue them generously. Where I draw the line is stuff that's just pure political, where it's someone wants to be there at a news conference and a bunch of camera flash bulbs popping with all the other like-minded AGs, and they're making a political statement. When you try to go in there and make political statements from the Attorney General's office, you hurt the state and you hurt yourself. Let me tell you why. The judge knows that you went out there and had a press conference saying how you were going to be the resistance and how it was political. Instead of you saying, okay, on the facts and the law, we got a case that we're supposed to win because of A, B, and C. When you go in that second way, you have a much better chance of winning because the judge says this person's here because they have a real legitimate legal problem and argument, not just because they want to make a political statement and swagger around for the cameras. There's just a difference in effectiveness the taxpayers deserve. It's not about protecting or coddling or going easy on anybody. Again, nobody's above the law. You go after what needs to be gone after. But if there's no case, you don't go after it just to,
So
again,
you feel
swagger
there
in
was
front
no
of the camera.
case against Donald Trump?
No, I didn't say that at all. I
Okay.
said you make a distinction. Now, let me tell you, for example, this tax thing where he supposedly, hid $500 million or his family hid $500 million in income, we're going to investigate the heck out of that. That's a big number. That's, something that's directly out of the pockets, potentially, of the people of the state of New York. So you go after that and you investigate it, and then if you have a case, you bring it. So, so this whole thing, very clear. I will tell you,
I love
I've been
the
in
fact
the
that you're running, brother, and I love the
But
fact that
hold
we
on.
have
I'm sorry.
somebody on both sides.
Let me go on. Look, my independence politically is something very unusual because while I'm a Republican and running as a Republican, I gave to Barack Obama, and not just a little, gave a lot, supported him early when other folks weren't supporting him, when folks were supporting Hillary. Right? I did a fundraiser that I was on the committee with Michelle Obama early when people said he couldn't win. Okay, Ken Thompson, same deal. When he was running against the machine, folks didn't support him. Tish James stood with Joe Hines. Now, Ken Thompson, I knew him, I knew what he was about, and I agreed and believed in a lot of the things that he believed in. And so I supported Ken, again, thousands and thousands of dollars, time, support, phone calls, because I knew he was going to do the right thing in the criminal justice system as Brooklyn DA if we could get him elected. But the machine stood in the way. The machine all stood behind Joe Hines. Now, that same Joe Hines, he put dozens of young black men behind bars, wrongful convictions. Ken Thompson got those convictions overturned working with one of my classmates from Harvard Law School, Professor Ron Sullivan, African-American professor. But if Tish James and the machine had her way, Ken Thompson never would have been elected, and those exonerations from wrongful convictions never would have happened.
Well, Ken Thompson had the people, and he also had us up here with me because that's Ken Thompson was my guy. Rest in peace. But my only problem is I love to see black brothers running Republican, Democratic. I love to see black brothers in politics. See, my only problem is this. I look at your son over here, and he's a mixed child. I have 5 mixed children, and when Trump came in office, the school system changed and the kids in the school changed. Trump is very divisive. And the fact that you support it and you support Trump is a little alarming, a little disturbing. And every time I look at Donald Trump, I see somebody that divides the country. Even to the fact that my son plays football, and if my son wants to take a knee, which is freedom of speech, I got to worry about the president calling them sons of bitches. You know what I mean? And I wouldn't want my son being looked at as a son of a bitch or your son being looked at it. And those are the reasons where I just can't see somebody still supporting and riding Donald Trump. Now, if you said, hey, MV, yeah, I I voted for him and I've supported his campaign, but I was wrong. He is a divisive person. I would understand, I'd be like, he gets it, but I don't see that in you. And that's the only thing that bothers me. And it's kind of hard to understand and listen to your politics and listen to the things that you say when we have such a president out there that's so divisive that you support, and that bothers me.
You see the mass shootings that went down, like in Pittsburgh at the Tree of Life Synagogue, and people saying that they're inspired by Donald Trump to say and do horrible, drastic things to each other. And I have to feel like this is awful for our country.
Well, look, we have to get past this notion that racism and anti-Semitism started with President Trump, because it didn't.
But people
and we're
feel
gonna
so
have
much
to
more
deal,
comfortable being public with it and doing things and saying, well, the president is doing this.
We're going to have to, but we're going to have to deal with racists and anti-Semites as a society long after, this president is gone, and we've had to deal with it long before. The question to me is, we have to control our own destiny. We have to take care of our own business. We have to be economically independent enough as a community that to the extent someone says something that we don't like, we think is counterproductive or not constructive or racist, that our destiny isn't determined by that.
We have to treat each other like human beings too, though. It's not just all about
agree
economics.
with that. No, I agree with that. And look, I will tell you, I said statewide in the debate, I thought in many instances the president needs to tone it down. I've said that point blank. And we've got to start trying to come together more. I agree with that wholeheartedly. But I've got an election for New York State Attorney General today. The people have a choice today of whether someone who has 25 years of experience, who have decades of commitment to the community, just a different type of commitment and a different way of manifesting that commitment, who can hold these people accountable. The fact of the matter is I've been doing this the way I'm doing it, which means I have the tools to hold these people accountable when they reach into your pocket for billions of dollars. I have the tools to hold these people accountable when they say you got to win a lottery to get into a decent school. I have the tools to hold these people accountable when they take black people's life savings and try to hand it to some developer that's their buddy. So we've got to have both. We've got to have, I agree, more civility. We've got to have some coming together. I understand the skepticism in the community about the president, but that should not be determinative of people's vote about me versus Tish James, because we've got too much at stake. We don't have another 4 years to wait, until we get a president in office that some people might think is a better president. We've got to deal with some of these problems at the local level now. And if we don't deal with it today, we're going to be in a world of hurt, because there's not going to be much of a state left. I mean, this corruption is driving businesses and driving jobs out. And even where there are jobs, our people aren't in position enough to be able to take advantage of them. I've talked to small businesses and employers all over this state. They want workers. They would love to hire young men of color, but they don't have enough of them, whether it's young men of color or other men or women. Frankly, they'd be happy to hire women of color, but they don't have enough people with the skills to do high-quality trade jobs, high-quality factory jobs, high-quality management jobs. They're not getting the people because our school system isn't doing what it needs to be doing and isn't partnering with us and getting these kids where they need to be. We've got to get our schools right. We've got to get some of these drugs off of our street.
We have to pay our teachers more.
Well, look, teachers need to be paid, absolutely, but we also need to make sure that the schools have an environment and rules where kids can learn properly. And we're not doing enough. We put money into the schools, we put resources in, but at some point, we have to demand some accountability for all those resources we're putting in. What I've seen for decades now is we haven't been demanding that accountability. Every year, they just make the same excuses. Well, the kids are poor. Well, the community has this issue or that issue. Stop blaming the community and stop blaming the kids and teach these kids to read and do math.
But
ridiculous.
I do feel like it is an all-encompassing thing, because a lot of things do start at home, right? How kids come to school. A lot of kids bring a lot of baggage when they come into the classroom, and a lot of that baggage comes from the home. And sometimes what comes from the home is what's going on with, okay, my father got incarcerated for having some weed on him, and now he has a record, and now he's on parole, and now he keeps on having to go back, and things that they see in their communities and with their parents having to work. And now my mom is having to be at work while I'm at home having to take care of myself. There's so many things that happen, I think, in the community and at home that have to be addressed at the same time that the school system has to be addressed too.
I agree with that, but then you have charter schools where those same kids from those same communities with those same problems are next to each other, and the charter school kids, same everything, are performing like this, and the regular way public schools kids are performing like this. So That's part of the answer, but with all due respect, it's not anywhere near all the answer, and we still have to demand accountability. I mean, look, you look at, you want to talk about, racism. To me, the racism when you say black and brown kids can't learn. The racism is when you take this, this rideshare Uber thing that de Blasio and his people did, where you had this yellow cab system. I got driven by, yellow cabs when I was younger. Black man, they just drive by, ignore you. Mm-hmm. I got refusals to take me to certain neighborhoods. Completely racist, right? We had that system for decades. The city didn't do anything about it. Then the rideshare companies came in, broke that game, broke that monopoly up, and now de Blasio and his people want to put it back. And these politicians are not standing up and saying, no, we're not going back to that. So, I mean, we can't even get these politicians, these crooked politicians, to stop putting in place systems that act openly in a racist way to us. Can't stop them from allowing this school system to deny our kids, from denying our kids the ability to move forward and to get those jobs that are out there. At some point, we got to look at what the real racism is and the racism that we can control and the racism that our community's politicians have the power to stop. And that's what's at stake today. That's why I want people to vote for me, because you know what? Again, I didn't have to do this. I did this because I've lived in this state all my life. I wasn't going to just put my money in my pocket, move to Florida, move to Texas, ignore the problem. I said, I've got to get in this because there are a lot of politicians, I think, who want to do the right thing, but they're caught up in the system and they can't do the right thing because they're beholden. But I don't have to worry about that. I can come here and do what I think is right.
Were you always a Republican? Because you said you supported Obama previously.
Well, you know what? I've been a Republican since the 1990s, but I've supported the right Democrats throughout that time, even though I'm a Republican. Absolutely. I look at who's best for America and who's best for upholding the Constitution, who's best for advancing the communities that I'm a member in, moving them forward. So, I perfectly believe in supporting the right person, and it's not so much about party, especially not in New York.
What have been your own issues dealing with racism? Because I'm sure being a black man who's a Republican, what are some things that you've heard either from people who are not Republicans and people within your own party?
Well, remember, people can see I'm black a lot sooner than they can see I'm Republican. You can't look at me from across the street and see that I'm a Republican.
And people see that you're running as a Republican.
Well, look, honestly, people have been really receptive. People are skeptical from the African-American community, some of them, and I say, you know what, let's talk about it. I'm not afraid to talk about the issues, talk about what people's concerns are, talk about what I think are the most important things for us to move forward, and people have always been open to that discussion. There's been no, hate emails, no, slurs, no people calling me incog or anything else. People have been unbelievably great because they say, hey, you know what? You're engaged. I may disagree with you or I may not understand why you believe what you believe, but let's talk about it. And that's
you say like Black Lives Matter and things like that?
Well, Black lives absolutely matter, but then there's a discussion. Okay, how do we have accountability, from all of our government, including law enforcement, but also ensure that there's public safety, right? I lived in minority communities for most of my life. I lived in Harlem and bought a townhouse when there was graffiti and crack vials in front of the side door of the house way back, just after the bad drug stuff ended uptown or at least started tapering down. My dad owned property and my mom owned property, just small little itty-bitty houses in the tough neighborhood in Buffalo. So I saw what senior citizens go through as they're hanging on in those neighborhoods, through thick and through thin and through the tough times, and how they're dependent upon the police and how they want to see that there isn't sort of gratuitous, targeting of African Americans by the criminal justice system, but how there are people doing stuff they're not supposed to be doing, and you have to have peace and safety on the streets so that they're not prisoner in their own homes. So I've seen both sides of this, and I say, yeah, you have to have law enforcement, right? You have to have accountable law enforcement, but you also have to remember that the people who have a real long-term stake in those communities want public safety and want justice as well. So, let me tell you a little example. I was in Buffalo, and there's a group called the Peacemakers, where community people actually go in ahead of the police. The police will cordon off an area. They'll go in and help sort out between the kids who are the real troublemakers or the people who are the real troublemakers when there's an incident, and other young brothers who just get caught up almost as bystanders. And they'll interact with those kids and say, look, we know your mom, we know your aunt, we know your grandma. go home, get out of this, go home, just don't mess with this, don't cross this line ever again. And then the people who are the real instigators and the problem people who are, creating a real public safety issue, those are the people who have to then deal with the system. So those sorts of community police interventions, those sorts of ways of balancing public safety where the police work with the community, that's the kind of thing we have to go toward. So you're right. I agree with you that all lives matter, but to get to where we have to be in terms of the community and advancing in public safety and an environment where we have the right kind of streets, there's more to it than that, and we have to have a balanced approach with both of those.
Well, I'm going to say Black Lives Matter.
I know, I
The reason
didn't
I'm
say
saying
all lives matter. I said Black
is
Lives
because
Matter.
it's us that are getting killed by police officers and that is unarmed. So, but we appreciate you for joining us, and head out there and vote today.
Listen, I'm not telling anybody who you should vote for, but I am saying that you have to be educated about who you are going out to vote for, and that's the most important thing.
Who you voting for, you?
I'm not going to disclose that right now.
Okay.
Yeah. And look, I thank you for having me on here. I really
You're
appreciate
voting in Jersey, Envy. This has
I'm
nothing
gonna
to
say
do with
I'm
anything.
Jersey.
Yeah,
Look. All right.
You had Bob Hugan up here. Are you voting for Bob Hugan?
Definitely not voting for Bob Hugan.
Yeah. Well, look, I appreciate you having me here. I appreciate the opportunity to try to clear some of this stuff up. And I'm looking forward to this election today because it's a great day for African Americans in this state. We have 2 African Americans running for Attorney General.
It's going to be historic.
It's going to be historic. And look, we've laid out a clear path. We've had a spirited contest. And look, I'm confident that I'm going to win. But at the end of the day, people have to get out there and vote. It's really at this point up to the voters. And we have a vision. I have a vision where people in this community really can control their own destiny. And I can force some accountability because let me tell you, we wake up tomorrow and I'm Attorney General. All the people ripping folks off in this state are going to be shaking in their boots because they know that if they're looking down the barrel of what Keith Wofford's going to do, they're going to have another day coming. So thanks again for having me, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk.
All right.
Yeah, Keith definitely wanted to come up here once he heard that Tish James was on here, and he had a lot of things that he wanted to say to I guess, counter the things that she had to say up here.
All right. Well, get out there and vote. It's The Breakfast Club. It's Keith Wofford.